All right, all right. We're back for another episode of the Bad Ideas podcast with Valerie Leung, partner and strategic advisor at ReOrder Studios. I've been pronouncing Valerie's last name poorly for the last 5 minutes. How did we do? Was I close?
Not bad. Getting there, and I really appreciate you for trying. Anyways, yeah.
It's an important thing. Super grateful to have you here. I think we'll talk about your podcast a little bit at the end, but you have an awesome presence. You've been doing things across a bunch of different industries, and you have a consulting background that's super unique. So getting your feedback on our really bad ideas is going to be amazing.
Yeah,
You're,
I hope so. I hope I'll be able to live up to this sort of
you
concept
will.
you have going, but that's sort of the essence of it sounds like what I do with my clients.
Yeah, here we go. All right, well let's dive in. You ready for the bad idea?
Let's go for it.
All right, so I'll pull this up, and then we'll spend as much time as we can reacting to it poorly, and then flip it into a good idea and see where our brains take us. So without further ado, our bad idea is reverse consulting. Clients provide advice to consultants, turning the tables on industry experts. What's your reaction?
I missed the first part of it. Can you just repeat the
Yeah, Rever-
explanation of the
it's
first?
reverse consulting. So instead of consultants, I mean, this is just how I understand it. There's no more detail, but instead of consultants providing advice to clients for a fee, clients are paying consultants to give them advice. So it's reverse consulting
Clients are paying for consultants
to
to
receive
tell
advice from them.
to receive advice. Okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right. And
so
that's all we
explaining
have.
it. Yeah, that's all we have. So no prep. It's pure reaction. But it seems like the reason why this is framed up as a bad idea. That's my team finds these on Reddit and stuff. Is because no one would pay to give somebody else advice. Like you're a business owner, you don't have any time. Like why would you hire a consultant and then pay them to listen to you tell them what to do? It's just like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
antithetical.
I mean, it sounds a little bit like burned out corporate executives from hearing, way too much advice and receiving way too much like PDF decks of
uh-huh.
telling them like what to do, justifying their difficult decisions, and now they're like, actually, let us tell you.
We'll tell you what to do. Yeah, and they wanted to, or maybe that's it. Like we're already going into good ideas, but maybe it's like a therapy service where the consultants are paid to listen to these burnout executives, so they feel like somebody's on the receiving end of their advice and coaching. I,
Yeah, have you seen the most recent? Am I getting this name right? John Oliver, the talk show host.
nah,
If it makes sense, I can send it to you later
yeah,
for you to post. He had a big sort of parody on the McKinsey and the big three
yeah,
consulting and what they provide to basically the entire economy. And it was a big parody and really making fun of the some of the hypocrisy, but also how it's needed. But he kind of talks about that.
yeah. Interesting. Um, I think the whole advice industry. I mean, you have real experience here, so I wonder why that's why the team picked it for you. But like the real advice industry is pretty convoluted, at least from my perspective. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think there's a whole lot of people that just either happen to be in the right place at the right time or happen to work with the right firm. So they
Yeah.
attach themselves or stack their resume of projects that were already doing well, that they can
Mm.
start like taking credit for, and so on. When in reality, all the experience comes from working with those people. At least like in
Oh,
my business is small world. We learn 10 times as much from our customers as they do from us, which we openly admit. Like they're the experts. They're already building an industry that can afford the engagement. So, um, I wonder if that's what this is
completely.
getting at. What were you thinking?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, building on what you're saying, I was just thinking that the consulting business is so dated.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's sort of a new term, that's arising. Well, it's depends on where you are in the consulting or agency work. But, co-creation is much bigger these days. And you
Mm-hmm.
really need to involve, it's the idea of like co-creating with your client and not just like going to your client trying to figure out what their problem is, going back to your ivory tower and then like drawing up some beautiful plan, and
Yeah.
we know it always ends up in like 99, slide deck
Yeah.
PowerPoint. You go back and you play it back, and I myself been trained. I've had some really unnecessary training. Actually, I'm trying to unlearn a lot of that now that I'm going back into innovation space. But they were so particular. We spent time to like really cross your T's and like dot your I's and making sure everything, all the boxes on the PowerPoint was aligned, and that it wasn't what it was. That's not really what the client cares about.
Yeah.
And we're here, drawing up a perfect sort of solution, and we haven't really incorporated the client, and mostly we haven't incorporated their end customers, and that's the whole idea of like co-creation. And so that's sort of
Mhm.
been, up and coming now because they know that the old ways are dated.
Yeah. Interesting. Maybe, I mean, we're really already moving into the positive side of things, but I wonder if that's where this idea came from. It's like some frustrated executive that, I know I need consulting help and I need someone to solve this problem, but I want you to listen to my perspective on the issue before prescribing me something. Because I almost wonder if the industry is too quick to say, oh, we know best. We'll tell you how to do your job and how to solve your business before they even understand what's going on. What do you think?
Oh, completely. I completely. And I feel like I have had to I'm lucky enough now that I think so, at least I've seen others sort of get not punished, but I've seen others had to learn the hard way,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of coming off overconfident and not really listening to the client. I mean, there's a discussion about how much confidence a consultant should have,
Yeah.
actually, and that's a really good discussion. Like, would you want a consultant who's like very confident about solving your problems, or do you want a consultant who's like honest with you and raw, and they're open with you the whole way?
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's going to be hard to justify the fees if the person isn't certain that they can solve the issue. Right. So there's a huge financial incentive to put out a bunch of people with towering egos, that are like basically pulling from the brand's equity. Like I made myself into this position and won myself into a role with this brand. Therefore, I must know something. So you must listen to what I have to say.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
I mean, experts is one thing, but you mean even consultants. I'm a general
Yeah.
consultant, but my expertise is in innovation and sustainability. But we can bring on, industry experts as
Mm.
well. That still doesn't actually speak to what your client is actually
Yeah.
dealing with. And like, I do think feelings is a part of it too.
Mhm.
Like, there's an emotional element to what they're worried about if they don't meet their goals,
Mhm.
and you have to like listen, you have to be with them this whole way. And I'm just, yeah, I mean, if I had to trash traditional consulting, I could
Well, that's
definitely.
definitely not the goal. I think there's super talented folks like you that like work in this space. I consider myself a consultant too. Not that I think I'm super talented, but I think I think part of this, we were just talking about it before the podcast. In my business, we get, I'd say like 30% or 40% of the businesses we talk to that come to us and say, "I'm here. I want to get here. Can you do it for me?" And it's like,
Mm,
well, wait a minute. Like we can definitely help you. There's tools we have that we can give you, but like you're here because of what you did. You're not here because of anything we did or anything we could do. Like the magic in your business is the unique value you create for your companies, and you're the
yeah.
superhero here. So to get from here to here, like we need to find a way to empower you to do more of that for more people. That's the only path forward. So it starts with your expertise. It starts with your magic, and if we do our job well, we give you the tools to do more of that for more
Mm,
people. So that, you were talking about that emotional component of it, getting them to turn around and look in the mirror and be like, what I'm doing is already working to this level. Like all I need help with is finding a way to do it for more people. It's not a totally new thing. It's not a firm prescribe me a solution that's totally different from what I'm doing. It's just like a little bit of leverage to do more of what's already working for me in my unique situation. Any
mm.
experience like that?
Absolutely. And another nuance that just came up
Yeah.
when you said that, is that I think a lot of executives actually have previously hired consultants knowing the answer, but they sort of kind of play dumb, and they steer the consultant towards
Yeah.
where they want to go. And likely, if the project is sort of not a beautiful, happy project like
Mhm.
cost cutting, and you know they need some external justification of why they're
Yeah.
doing that, right? And then they can turn back around and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I hired this amazing consultancy firm. They're traditionally known to help us do X, Y, Z, like reaching our goals." And that just happens. It just happens that we have to cut, 20%
Oops.
of our
They
staff,
said so. It's
and
not on me. They said so.
traditionally,
So we have to do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that happened a lot.
We had this. I mean, this is startup advisory, but quick story. So I was working for um, a company called Rally Points, a vertical social network for military veterans and service members. Um, and we had some pretty decent growth going. It was mostly tied to paid advertising, which we didn't like. We wanted to get more organic. And our CEO somehow like convinced one of the co-founders of LinkedIn to join our board. And it was like, Nick, we're going to fly to California and meet with this guy, and he's going to tell us how to grow and how they did it and everything. And so naturally, I'm like shaking. Like, how do I sit in a room with someone who grew a company to that size and learn about it? And I walked into the room, and I think the first question our like founder CEO asked was like, "All right, so how do we do it? Like, how do we grow? How did you do it?" And he looked back at us and was like, "I don't know. Like, every brand grows differently. What are you doing now? What's working?" And just the fact that someone who already achieved so much on such a high level was totally honest about like I have no idea. Like, how are you growing now? How can I help? Instead of launching into like a whole prescription was really eye opening for me. Like immediately took the temperature in the room down, and we spent the next hour and a half brainstorming, but just super honest about like what worked here is not going to work there. Here's a framework for thought. Tell me how you're thinking about it. Maybe I can help you learn from what I did. It was a really amazing experience.
Yeah, I mean that in essence is a way of, I think, that's exactly what I was alluding to earlier. Like this
Yeah.
over confidence and this like unnecessary ego is sometimes standing in the way of you collaborating. And
Mm-hmm.
collaborating is something that's quite interesting to me. But yeah, I guess I won't overgo into that. I'm also thinking about like the essence of the topic here. You're saying
Yeah.
how you pay someone to listen to your
Yeah.
advice. Um, I think the advice part is still like shaky grounds because that
Yeah.
just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like sometimes unsolicited advice and unwanted advice is already like annoying enough, and then you have to,
Yeah.
you
More.
know,
Right.
get paid for it. Like that's even
Mm-hmm.
weird. But if we were to, take like a flavor of it, in terms of collaboration, like, can I pay to, tell you about my idea and, test it with you? But it's really my idea and I'm still telling you, and like, it's still me driving it. But I think there's maybe some more grounds to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect inflection point for us to script flip and start looking at the positives of this. But noting down, you're absolutely right. I think the advice part of it is what makes it such a bad idea, because advice on its own has such a broad spectrum of value. Like it's kind of hard to find a market for it. But I think you're really onto something with business owners or executives. Like they have ideas and they just want someone to listen. And there's got to be demand for that, right? There's got to be an actual business where, now, I mean, you even talked about the advisory side of things, hiring a firm that will just validate your idea, expend
I mean,
ungodly amounts of
there's
money.
huge value.
Yeah.
There's huge value in that. I
Yeah.
mean, essentially a part of what I do now is similar to that. It's a firm is um, often we work with like big firms and they're incubating something.
Mm.
And when they're incubating something, they're not entirely sure. And, their minds are in like, they're in that stuff like all day long and they don't have an external perspective. And
Mm.
it's just like any problem you do all day and you're like, I don't have any more ideas. And also you're completely biased because you're so invested in something. And then, you hire somebody to say, can you like really kick the tires on this for me and go out there and test it for you? And I guess here we're even extrapolating that a little bit more
Mhm.
in terms of how much we can collaborate. So yeah, I think maybe I think there's more to that. And I actually think that's like a breath of fresh air for a lot of executives. I could imagine,
Mhm.
just like coming in differently, the way you said, like, well, I don't know, I don't have like a
Yeah.
magic. formula, you know, but I need to hear out your case. And I think that makes people feel good when you're listening to
Yeah.
something that they're thinking about all day.
Yeah, especially when the risk is there. And I think, if you're more senior, like a founder, CEO, or super senior executive, you have a huge budget, huge goals you're going after, the risks you're taking are larger. And sometimes you
Oh yeah.
can't bulletproof the risk. I think people who make it that far get pretty good at taking calculated risk and more win than lose, or the wins are bigger than the losses. But um, having another voice, just to listen to you, yeah, it might not transform or limit the risk, but it might give you the peace of mind you need to take the plunge. And there's actually like a lot of
Yeah.
value there.
Yeah. And like kind of going out to validate and I mean, I would even add maybe invalidate.
Hmm.
Like, you know, if you find the answer is like really no, it's like that is the value of your external perspective. Yeah, but still, I guess you're being paid, and I'd have to dig a little bit more on that. Like, if the customer is paying to tell you like what is good,
Yeah.
how much goes to the effort.
It can be general advice. Like the customer is, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it could be anything, right? If someone's willing to pay, there's got to be somebody who can listen. You're just a professional listener at that point. But if it's a consultant, like I think your point on collaboration is a big one. Like paying to have someone
Mm.
involved in the process. So you're receiving advice, but you're getting involved in the idea in some capacity, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think this maybe, you know, opposite of like validating is
Hmm.
great. And I mean, that's what you hope you can help your clients do more of. But what if you were to go out there and test and it didn't work? And it's like, actually, there's real no viable market for this.
Hmm.
Or actually, there's no real need for this. This is just a great to have, but you're going to be against headwinds out there. Like, I think that's fair
Hmm.
um, on the part of a consultant to go back and say.
Yeah. I think there's kind of a pocket version of this. Do you do any journaling?
Some, I don't say I'm a disciplined
So
journaler
this
though.
this is actually the same company. So Rally Point, the VP or like CTO, the engineering leader at the time, this guy named Michael Yankowski. I think he's the CEO of that company now. Super, super, super smart guy. And um, we were talking. He's a couple years older, but like decades older in experience. Just one of those guys who's seen a lot for his time. And I asked him, I was really frustrated about something. And I was like, what do you do when you're super stressed and you're forced to deal with something? And he was like, Nick, when I'm really mad, I write the nastiest email I can think about and then I delete it. I was like, that sounds
Yeah.
ridiculous. But he's like, I even put their name in there. So there's the threat of it, but I write everything I'm thinking and then I delete it. So I started doing that and it helped like emotionally on a huge level. But yeah, I never really kind of made the connection between that and journaling until recently. Bringing it back to this idea, I think journaling is kind of putting yourself in that advice receiving line. So it's not so
Mm.
much about just making entries for the sake of making entries. It's like when your mind is running and you think things or feel things, you can write them down, and the second you start writing, the part of your brain that's engaged is different, and you kind of wind up solving your own problems. So I'll vent to myself just like that email in a journal, and throughout the writing process, will start to advise myself out of whatever the problem is. It's wild. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I've experienced something
Hmm.
very similar. I mean, like I said, I'm not a disciplined journaler, but uh, I definitely have felt the same. And I've been given that advice actually to just like write the
Hmm.
feelings down because it's also like hard, the opposite, you know, where you don't write it down, you
Hmm.
bottle it up and you get it all mixed up in your head. Whereas like writing, you're forced to kind of tell the story
Hmm.
linearly. And when you do, you can kind of like break them up into chunks. And like you said, you know, I can start to see almost like the paragraphs and then so that's one thing you can see it clearly and then the other one is somehow when you write it all out it feels like you kind of
Hmm.
vented it to the universe
Yeah.
a little bit and then definitely it de-emotionalizes a little bit and I mean I think business people like to act like you know logic wins and reason wins which it does but we also know that the market is
Hmm.
so emotionally driven and executives. I mean, they're all emotionally driven. We're invested in things, and so I think writing it out, it like kind of makes you, just slightly detached. And when you are like, it helps a lot to think through
Hmm.
things clearly.
So that, I mean, I think you just created this business. I think we just fixed the bad idea and made it a good idea. And what I mean is, there's a lot of value in that as like a real person because I think, well, one, certain companies like record everything you type, so writing out an angry email is super super high risk, especially if you're at a major like public company. And somebody's going to accidentally hit send doing that and then like sue the Bad Ideas podcast for sharing, because they hear the emotional stuff is
Maybe we should
I know
caveat
we
that then.
no liability,
Don't put the
no
actual email.
liability. But if you make it a consultant, right? Again, they're under some kind of crazy NDA, and you have someone come in and you vent to them in this capacity. Say, I'm feeling this, I'm thinking this, and here's what I want to do, and here's where it needs to go. They almost don't even have to listen. They just need to steer you through your thought process and the thing that you most strongly react to help you unpack until you see it through some other prism. And that is consulting. It could engage at like a very senior level. Uh, and again, to your point, it's not advice. So you're not giving these people advice. They're just an outlet for you to let out all these things, like frustration or passion or curiosity, and to allow you to reflect it off something that helps steer you through to the actual solution that is in there somewhere. It's just buried under a bunch of other things. What do you think?
That is that is true. Like they
Yeah.
need to be facilitated and coached sort of through the thinking process. Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense from my perspective because like I said, I do something quite similar, maybe on a
Hmm.
parallel universe to that because I basically do that with my clients for their innovation projects. So, I don't
A
have
solution.
like, I mean, if
Yeah.
I had the innovation answer, I'd go and
Yeah.
build it myself and make the
Mhm.
unicorns myself, right? But it's more like my clients are the experts. They're the ones who have the ideas. They're the ones who have the connections, and they just need to be facilitated along this really
Mhm.
messy journey. And oftentimes, like they'll kind of come to a dilemma, and I'm like, I think they look to me and they kind of want some help. And I mean, I can help, and there are times when I'm invested, but there are other times where I'm like, it's better that I remind you, like you are going to be the
Mhm.
founder of this project. I come
Yeah.
from an outside perspective. I can tell you that the important thing to remember here is
Mhm.
etc. These parameters, like resource constraints, time to market, all these things, but it's ultimately their decision. And I think when you're so invested, it's actually really nice to have, yeah, it is nice to have, somebody who's less invested
Yeah,
to
they're on
talk to you
your
through these
team.
things.
No, no, this is
Actually,
great.
I
Like they're
like
on your
this.
team. It's awesome that you have actual experience in the thing that we're kind of brainstorm creating. Again, like you've already created a big piece of it, but that framing, taking the original bad idea from customers paying clients to give them or paying consultants to give them advice to, customers paying consultants to facilitate, as you pointed out, like their discussion and thought process and plan is a super high value thing. So that pivot and the methodology you're putting out
Mm.
there, it's clearly working, right? Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think so, and from what I see, it's the growing way as well, and I strongly believe in it, and I think it's from my own like experience of working in a big four and like seeing that kind of,
Mm-hmm.
again, that arrogance, that confidence. I think it's so 90s, it's so 80s. It works. It's like cut this, add this, push sales on this, but it's so different now. We're so much more disruptive. Like we can get creative, and so. And also, I think that's what's fun. But yeah, I
Me either.
didn't think we'd end here from term of reverse
Mm-hmm.
engine,
No, this is pretty
reverse
wild. It's
consulting.
awesome that it's kind of run head on into your experience too. So grateful to have you here with us as a guest. On that note, how do people get in touch with you? Because I imagine there's some notepads out right now. Like I gotta find Valerie and talk to her about how to fix X, Y, Z.
Oh, that would be so. Oh, that would be so exciting. Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you, Nick, again for having me on. This was really fun.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to, like what to expect and how to go about it. But it was really fun. And I mean, people
Mhm.
can reach me easily on LinkedIn. I am partnered in strategic advice at ReOrder Studios. So you can also find me there through the website. And also, I have a podcast
Mhm.
called Modern Idealist, and it's a podcast for ambitious, driven career individuals who want to make an impact in their personal lives and at work and in society. So if you're interested in that, that's also a great
And
place
connect with
to
you. Awesome.
listen to the
So
work I do.
reach out directly, find you on LinkedIn, and tune into Idealist Podcast, Modern Idealist Podcast, to get a little bit of you on demand. This is
Modern
awesome.
Idealist.
Well, I'll make sure that we drop a link into the videos when we put these out there, so people can click directly to you. And maybe if we're looking, we'll get you back to do another one. Really appreciate it. Awesome.
Yeah, that would
Thank you.
be
Thank
super
you.
fun. Thanks for having me again.